For joining us again on TVC Breakfast. Now, following the persistent power outages affecting the country, the federal government has vowed to sell off 5 electricity distribution companies. Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabu says banks and the asset management company, which have been managing these discos that took over because of the failure of the management to repay loans, lack the technical capacity. Now, those affected are Abuja, Benin, Kano, Kaduna, and the Ibadan electricity distribution companies. Blackout has now persisted in many states, with discos blaming low allocation from the national grid as well as gas shortages to generating companies as the major causes, amongst others. In the meantime, consumers are lamenting that the epileptic power situation has worsened since January, and that's what we want to talk about now. We have joining us via Zoom from Ibadan, Oyo State, Professor of Energy and Electricity Law of the University of Lagos, UNILAG, Professor Yemi Oke. Thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning, Prof. So what do you make of this move to sell off these challenged discos?
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Good morning, Prof.
Thank you.
Right. Prof, carry on.
My take. Have been saying, most of my interventions have been saying, I've said, and I still say, where we are in the power sector is such that we need to go for another round of reacquisition and refinancing of the privatization that we had in the sector.
All right.
The reason today we didn't pay sufficient attention to it. Hope you're hearing me.
Yes, we can. Go on.
Good. We didn't pay sufficient attention to it as a country. But now, it appears we are about to do things differently under the current regime. Those entities were wrongly bought by incompetent group of persons. They had no fund to reject the sector, the entities they bought, and they needed to also take certain steps that weren't forthcoming. In a situation where we have 90% of those discos being technically insolvent, shows that Nigerians should not expect megawatts from anywhere because they just lack it. And they've not been efficient in terms of losses, we call it C&C losses. They've not been able to sufficiently pay for the megawatts given to them by the discos. So that brought about the challenge of liquidity in the system. I've said, and I know, the only way to get out of some of these challenges will be to revisit the privatization and bring on board new players, particularly for those that have been acquired by banks and other institutions, including AMCOM. Federal government took the right decision. Some of us had advocated that the government should take those decisions or steps. Those were decisions taken in the best interest of the country, because where we are, truth be said, the power sector is about to collapse on all of us. We've had cases of those discos where government had against an intention to take over and repackage. That doesn't mean others are also doing well. We've had cases of load rejection, lack of gas to fire their plants, and so on and so forth. We have a lot of challenges in this sector. But those challenges, are they surmountable? The answer is yes, if we take appropriate steps as a country. And I think, in all honesty, this is one laudable step that ought to have been taken years back. We advocated the same thing under the previous administration, but there may be a certain entrenched interest. Of course, that wouldn't have been in the interest of the country if what happened has not been made to manifest. Those entities are not buoyant. Those entities are not solvent. They are not capable of paying for megawatts that is supplied to them. They will continue to reject loads. They will not have the resources to expand their infrastructure. They will never get efficient with their losses and costs, and the consumers will be complaining. They will continue to get plunged into deeper debts. Nigerians will not reap the benefits. Investors will not make gains from subsidly privatized and the entities they bought, and no investors will be encouraged to come and invest in the sector because they're going to look at the challenges of the existing players. And will a reasonable country sit back, fold its hand, and allow things to go from bad to worse? Definitely no. Right. And this is why stakeholders and experts said we're about to take the right decision, and we're hoping that they can go through the progress.
All right, so you mentioned about the government totally privatizing the sector and bringing in new players to ensure that we have constant power. But there's been concern about infrastructure. Even the TCN and other agencies involved, the DISCOs, the TRANCOs, and GENCOs as well, have complained about moribund and old infrastructure. How do you think that bringing in private sector players, other players in the electricity value chain or the sector, can ensure we have constant power, looking at the fact that there are moribund infrastructure that we have, as we have heard in the past?
It took me more than, if I get it correctly, more than about 15 years or more to point out the challenges we are having now. And it's all out there in the media, print, YouTube, in your stations, other stations. Consistently, we've been pointing these challenges out. In the position of the government, I mean, according to the minister, though, we start to see how that will manifest. They're suggesting that some of the discourse we need to operate along the line of states. We had suggested well over a decade ago that those discos will need to get cross-licensed by state government to do exactly what they are doing at the state level for better efficiency. Government is going in that direction now. It took us well over 15 years to point out that power should be decentralized. Recently, we had that under the Constitution, and now we're having that under the new Electricity Act. Okay. We've had those challenges for too long. And we haven't taken sufficient practical practice steps to redress them. We are just seeing those steps coming now. Those entities currently running the discos, they have no financial resources. Government had needlessly been subsidizing the power sector. They were subsidizing production, which is wrong, not consumption. The GENCOs have been generating at a loss. Government had been picking the losses. Discos had been selling those megawatts at a loss. Government had been paying for those losses. Nigerians have not been enjoying stable electricity because there are no new investments. And it now got to a point, the gas producers are no longer willing to sell gas. And our plants are essentially gas-fired. Because gas, you never hear of a gas producer having hydrogas. Gas is hot cake globally. If gas is produced, it is bought or sold almost immediately in the international market at good prices. There's no encouragement or incentive for them to produce gas and meet their domestic gas obligation for the power sector. Because MBET, which is supposed to be bulk trader, had not been performing on full invoices, meaning there has been shortfalls, which have been carried over. So they pull back their gas supplies to the system. If you have a system that relies almost 80% on gas and those who ought to give you the feedstock are pulling back, what do you expect to happen? So they need to start to ration the megawatts.
All right, Prof.
And almost all these issues are challenged.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
All right, Prof. Let me just quickly, push this in so that you can respond to that as well. The federal government has said it will not only sell off this challenge discos, it will also unbundle them, because look at Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company that controls about 7 states. In the words of the minister, and I know that many Nigerians will possibly, laud what he said, where he said it's practically impossible for one disco to control 7 states and expect that disco to be sufficient. And he also says, so now is the time, now that there is a law, now is the time for each state to exert some form of control in addition to the federal government in how the discos, the rearranged discos will perform better. Do you think this is a step in the right direction as well?
To be honest with you, this had been a step I advocated more than 15 years ago. I wrote it, I sent papers, I followed through. Because I think that was the only thing I would get out of these challenges. What would disco lose? Nothing. This idea of franchising is not making sense. Even if you generate vowed IPPs, independent power plants, you cannot trade with it in a particular geographical location because a particular disco already exists there. And it says my franchise, my area of authority. In your area of authority, you have 2 megawatts to sell to people. And somebody has generated, you are saying you cannot sell, you have to come through me. The sector is challenged as structured, and we've been having issues with the structural challenges as well as the governance issues, regulatory issues in the sector. We are done with the law because the law has been changed. However imperfect the new law is, it's still a law, a piece of legislation that could be used to efficiently operationalize the sector. For instance, you mentioned Ibadan Disco. I'm not the one that mentioned Ibadan Disco, but let me use Ibadan Disco as a case study. Ibadan Disco is already a licensed entity, is a regulated entity, controlling a number of states. Ibadan Disco will remain Ibadan Disco, but it will have offices or set up a subsidiary to take charge of distribution issues in Ogun State, in Oyo State, and other states that it covers. What happens with that? It's still going to be the owner. States will now cross-license the subsidiaries to do exactly what they are doing, and they will set up physical structures in there to be able to perform and discharge their functions and duties effectively. All those Nigerians that have bypassed their meters, they can collectively now track those. All those Nigerians that are having issues, they can effectively attend to them. They can now reduce their TC and C losses, which is humongous. They can better now manage their megawatts and recover their bills and get better efficient. By the way, federal government has stakes in these entities. We advise federal government to pull back. Federal government did that. They recalled the shares of the federal government in the hands of course, Bureau of Public Enterprises. They gave it back to Minister of Finance Incorporated. And we're saying this government is listening. This government is taking steps. Those are not new things advocated. They have been advocated well over 15 years, documented. They are there. I can send it to whoever needs it. We're not just taking those practical steps that will get out of the challenges we have faced. The discos are not going to lose anything. It's like having the headquarters of a bank, and we have the bank having subsidiaries, one dealing with FX, one dealing with retail banking, one dealing with insurance. For better efficiency, it's still the same bank. It's going to bring about multiplicity of income for them, and they get better efficient. The existing structure is not going to work, has never worked, and it will not work unless we rejig it. And that's exactly what this federal government is. Commendably so. I want to see more of those actions and steps.
Okay, so what about the use of alternative sources of power, seeing that we are a long way to go in getting constant power in this country?
Thank you. That's a very important question. We got it wrong also as to the alternatives, renewable options. We got it wrong. That was why years ago in 2006, I came up with what is called decentralized energy options, DEOP, DEOP, with a small s. Meaning we need to amass the megawatts we can get from all sources and all available sources. But under the old unamended constitution, that was why the problem started from. Under the old unamended constitution, power was decentralized technically because the federal government was in charge of on-grid generation, distribution, and transmission, while the state was supposed to be in charge of generation, transmission, and distribution for off-grid under the old law. But under the now repeat Electricity Act, everything was centralized. Both on-grid and off-grid and renewables were essentially for federal government, contrary to what the law said. And we argue that you are operating the Electric Power Sector Reform Act now repeat in a manner that contradicts the Constitution. Massive contradiction. Nobody was listening. Reported that the idea of rural electrification and rural electrification agency, rural electrification fund that was supposed to be dealing with off-grid generation was conflicting with the Constitution, which emphasized off-grid for states. If government was going to partner with state government or local government, that is fine. Then government should not be the one running solar panels or this low-level generation at the level of the states and local government. And that was why we haven't seen much in terms of renewables. Renewables are off-grid. Essentially, states should be in charge of mini-grid, mobile grid, captive, embedded at small-scale levels. A bit of megawatts, 1, 2 here and there across the state, given to entities, distinct from existing discos, or subsidiaries of the discos to run it. So in the case of Ibadan and others that we mentioned, if, for instance, we say the government says, oh, Ibadan, come and set up here to generate off-grid. Oh, there is solar here. There is biomass here. There is embedded here in units of megawatts and mini-grids to power a particular, for instance, Abuja industrial estate in Ogun State. A smart disco in that area will set up a structure to run that independently and efficiently and focus on other customers. But the structure we had that it was the federal government, where federal government was the one in charge of embedded solar panels, all those basic mundane things, was needless. And unfortunately, we still have that in the new Electricity Act. And I'm saying, federal government should not, and I want to be quoted, federal government should not bother itself with rural electrification because since inception, that agency had been perpetrating fraud.
So who should?
Recently, I'm getting there. Recently, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu sacked the MD. That's about third levels of major fraud since they set up that agency. It will only happen like that because you expect federal government now to be controlling rural electrification. Federal government sitting up there, coming down there to states and communities to be doing it. State governments should be the ones in charge of rural electrification in collaboration with the local government and wards in their states. They can structure an arrangement that will make each local government to generate at least 1 or 2 megawatts in 2 or 4 years. Mini grids, packaged well packaged, with targeted investment and investors. It is not the state government, a particular state is serious and there is market there. For instance, Ogun State government may package an entity, license it, to go and partner with investors to generate power for Agbara Industrial Estate.
All right, Prof.
Shagamu Industrial Estate, Abuja Industrial Estate, and free the megawatts in those areas for consumers, other consumers. We need to rejig the sector, and I think the government is doing the right thing now.
Right. And in terms of rejigging the power sector, a lot has been said, as you say, still being said on how one can just better this, challenge reading sector. When you talk about low allocation from the grid, gas shortages, in addition to the challenges with privatization itself, how will all these interventions by the federal government also address these perennial problems with the grid? We've seen how many times the grid has collapsed so far this year, and we're in April, as well as the issue with gas and other factors.
Let me be honest with you. The grid will still collapse. Last 2-3 years, we predicted an average of 12 to 14 collapses per annum. This year, we might have like 11 or 12 collapses of the national grid. I'm not a prophet or two. What will make a grid to collapse? They are all there, not fixed. 2, when they generate those megawatts, I am telling you, 30 to 35% of what is generated and distributed is bypassed by Nigerians. I mean Nigerians, so I'm not extricating anybody, all of us. Even big men, they bypass. And federal government already subsidized those megawatts. Unscrupulous Nigerians will bypass. And the discos know that they bypass. When they bring out their ladders, they will collect money due to the discos and pocket it and reconnect back. Staff of the discos. We all know these things. And we have a regulator there who's not pushing his feet down to regulate efficiently. I just listened to you on the EFCC, what that fellow is doing. If you take on a public job, you should not be afraid of losing the job or resigning, provided you know in your process you are doing the right thing. This is our country. You are not doing anybody a favor getting appointed and doing the right thing for your country. We need patriotic persons to get on board and do the right thing, including power sector, including anti-corruption, including the educational sector, including health.
So in all of this, what's the way forward for us now? Because it's been said, and it's what everyone knows, and I'm sure you also know, that once we have constant power, the economy booms. Jobs are created and all of that. How do we go from here?
There's never a time I will have enough time to explain myself. I've documented 20 things that we need to do. A number of it have been done. One was we need to go through another round of reacquisition and refinancing of the sector. That the disco should get cross-licensed by states. Federal government should back off from off-grid, all these education agencies and education. Changing the constitution, changing the electric power sector reform act, which has also been done. We now have electricity act. A lot of things have been advocated. Well, I'm not saying we should reverse the privatization. No, we should revisit it. The distos will also surrender some of their shares. The shares will be diluted. We now give those shares to a prudent entity with financial and technical background that can take charge and run the sector and make the sector attractive to investors. Put in new funds. Now make sure the money will not go down to trade with efficiency. There must be sectoral efficiency in the sector. Efficiency at the level of governance and regulation. Efficiency at the level of operation. Efficiency at the level of technical details. Efficiency at the level of financial and management details, because a lot of fraud, mismanagement was go on out there, and we know. So essentially, power sector is a regulated sector. Once you are privatized, the job of government is to bring on board effective regulation in the sector. That is not being done. Right. When something happens in the financial sector, nobody talks of the federal government. People talk about the CBN governor or the Central Bank of Nigeria, because Central Bank is the regulator. When something happens in the power sector, nobody should talk of the federal government. Right. It is the NERC that's in charge as a regulator. The buck stops on his table. All right. Thank you.
All right, Professor Yemi Oke, we thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on TVC Breakfast. Professor Oke.